Welcome back to Product Huddle, the podcast where we talk about the real product management, not the theory version. I'm Anna, here with Jeff, and today we're tackling how to say no without actually saying the word no.
Yeah, and before anyone rolls their eyes, this isn't about being manipulative or political. So recognizing that in complex organizations, how you say something matters as much as what you say.
So this came from a LinkedIn post you wrote that really resonated with people, as I'm seeing. What was the insight?
It was really, really simple. It was basically that toddlers are amazing at saying no. They do it constantly, they do it confidently, and they do it without apology. And then somewhere between the time that we're 3 years old and that first product job, we completely forget how.
Yeah, I don't think this is in PM's head at all. Like saying no is risky in most organizations. It can label you as uncooperative, slow, or not commercial enough. And once that perception sticks, it's hard to undo. So the toddler comparison works, but only if we acknowledge that PMs operate in a system where every no has downstream effect.
Exactly. It sounds uncooperative, not a team player, not strategic enough to find a way. So you develop this whole vocabulary to avoid it. Let's revisit next quarter. I love this, but the resources are tight. Can you help me understand the urgency? And every PM book tells you this is a problem, that you need to get comfortable saying no, as if it's just a confidence issue.
But it's not.
No, it's not. And here's what they miss. A toddler's no works because they have no relationships to protect. They don't care if saying no damages trust with the VP who controls their budget. They're not thinking 3 moves ahead about whether this no costs them the political capital that they'll need next month.
So today we're going to talk about why no without saying no isn't a weakness, it's actually the job, and how to do it well versus doing it badly.
Yeah, because there's a big difference between strategic relationship management and just being conflict avoidant. So let's go ahead and get into it.
Okay, so let's start with the premise. Why doesn't the standard advice work? Just get comfortable saying no or practice being more direct.
Because that advice treats this like it's a confidence problem. If you just build up enough courage, you'll be able to say no and everything will be fine. But when you say no as a PM, you're not just declining a request, you're affecting someone's quarterly goals, their perception of you, your relationship with their team, and potentially your own ability to get something that you'll need later.
Yeah, and this is a part people underestimate, I think. Every no has a shadow cost. It affects trust, future asks, how your team is perceived, sometimes even whether people loop you in early next time or bypass you completely. So when PMs hesitate, it's usually not because they're weak, it's because they're doing the math.
Right. And the toddler doesn't pay those costs. When a 3-year-old says no to eating vegetables, the worst thing that happens is maybe they go to bed a little hungry. They're not worried about next quarter's budget allocation.
Yeah, okay. But let me push a bit on this because I can already hear people thinking, isn't this just politics with better language? Where's the line between being strategic and being honestly kind of fake?
I knew you were going to ask that. And no, here's the distinction. Being political means saying yes when you mean no, or making commitments that you can't keep to avoid conflict. And that's just destructive. Being strategic here means you're still saying no, but you're doing it in a way that preserves the relationship and keeps the conversation flowing and productive.
Okay, give me an example.
So a sales VP comes to you and they say, we need this feature for a $200,000 deal that we're closing next month. And if we don't have it, we'll lose the customer. The toddler is going to say, no, that's not on the roadmap. The political PM is going to say, absolutely, we'll get right on that. And then they scramble around and they miss a bunch of deadlines. The strategic PM says, help me understand, is this feature actually the blocker? Is there a way that we can unblock them with a workaround while we build this properly? If we rush this, we risk breaking X and Y. So we don't want to do that.
Yeah. And what I like about the example that you gave right now is the strategic response doesn't actually dodge responsibility. You're not saying, not my problem. You're saying, let's solve the real problem without creating 3 new ones. And that's the difference people miss usually.
Exactly. You're turning it into a collaborative problem-solving conversation instead of a power struggle. A toddler's no is really just boundary setting. A PM's no is strategic relationship management. And that's not a job, or that's not the weakness. That's actually the job.
Okay, so if that's the theory, how do you actually do this in practice?
So, in my experience, there are really three main ways a PM says no without saying no, and each one is appropriate for different situations.
Okay, walk us through them.
Okay, number one, the redirecting question. And this is where you turn the request back into a conversation about priorities. You're not saying no, you're asking them to help you say no. So, this is examples would be if we do this now, we're going to need to deprioritize something else. What do you think about that trade off? Or help me understand why this quarter versus next quarter, what changes if we wait? And then this is, I think, the most important question. What happens if we don't do this? What's the actual cost?
But I have to say, what I'm noticing is that this isn't passive at all. You're forcing the trade offs into the open, and you're basically saying, if this matters, let's be honest about it, what we're willing to sacrifice. I really like it. And a lot of requests don't survive that moment, honestly.
Yeah, right. And here's what's great about this moment. Most of the time, when people actually think through the trade offs, they realize their request isn't as urgent as they thought, or they come up with a different solution themselves.
Okay, so that was number one. What's number two?
I call this one the scoped alternative. This is where you say, I can't give you 100% of what you asked for, but I can give you something that solves 80% of the problem now with about 20% of the works. Examples would be, we can't build the full feature by next month, but we could do a manual workaround for this one customer while we do it properly. Or we can't change the entire UI, but we could add a configuration toggle that gives you most of what you need.
This actually feels very yes and to me. You're not rejecting the need, you're reshaping the solution if it fits reality. And honestly, this is where I see strong PMs separate themselves, not in saying no, but in finding the version that actually ships.
Exactly. You're not blocking them. You're just redirecting them to something that's actually achievable in the time that you've got.
Okay, so we have number one, we have number two. What's number three?
Call this the strategic delay. And this is more, you're not saying no forever. It's more of a not now. And you're being transparent about why. It might be, we are 100% committed to shipping these other features this quarter. Let's revisit this at the start of the next quarter when we have a clearer handle on our capacity and the resources. I love this idea and I want to give it the attention that it deserves. And we're way too deep in what we're working on today. Can we schedule time in 2 weeks to really dig in? Or, this feels urgent. Let's see how it plays out over the next month, and then we'll have better data to make this decision.
Okay, but here's where people get burned because this can sound like professional stalling, right? How do you make sure this doesn't turn into classic? Let's revisit that everyone know means that that will never happen actually.
Fair enough. You're not lying. You're saying, let's revisit this when you're not saying, let's revisit this when you mean never. You're really trying to create space to make a better decision later when you have an opportunity to collect more information, more data, or have more capacity to actually execute.
Honestly, this is gold. If I heard this as a junior PM, this would really help me. But I'm hearing three approaches. So, how do you know which one to use?
It's a good question. It really depends on three things. First is, how urgent is it really? If it's really a time sensitive request, that scoped alternative, giving somebody 80% instead of the 100% solution is your best bet. Give them something now, even if it's not perfect. Second, how strong is your relationship with the stakeholder? If you have a lot of trust built up, you can be more direct with redirecting the questions. If the relationship is new or fragile, I would typically use that strategic delay to give myself a little more breathing room. And then the third question is, how confident are you that this is the wrong priority? If you know for certain that it's wrong, redirecting questions will force the conversation about trade-offs and you'll usually get that to be uncovered. If you're not certain, then strategic delay gives you time to buy a little bit more information, to gather data, and to make a better decision of whether you think it is right or wrong.
So, the pattern I'm hearing is that all three approaches do the same thing. Basically, they keep the conversation alive without committing to the wrong thing. None of this shuts people down. They just change the shape of the decision.
Exactly right. The goal isn't to win here by getting them to back down. The goal should be to make a better decision together about what really matters.
Okay, let's talk about the failure mode here because I can imagine PMs listening to this and thinking, great, now I never have to take a hard stance on anything.
Yeah, and there's a risk there, and I see it's happening. PMs who get so good at saying no or saying no without saying no that they never actually have to say no, and that's a problem.
Yeah, but there are moments they have to say no directly, right? So when is that?
Well, there are three situations where a direct no is actually better. First is when the relationship cost is lower than the clarity cost. If being indirect creates confusion or false hope, you need to be direct. We're not going to build a mobile app this year. I know that's not what you want to hear, but I need to be clear so you can plan accordingly.
What I would say, ambiguity creates more damage than disappointment, right? So clarity would be actually kinder move.
Exactly. The second example is when you've already said a strategic no multiple times, and for whatever reason, they're just not hearing it. Sometimes people interpret let's revisit next quarter as maybe, and they keep pushing. And you need to be clear. I appreciate your persistence. I need to be direct. This isn't happening now, and here's why.
Yeah. What I remember when we talked about this kind of situations that you mentioned escalating clarity. I really love that sentence. So this feels like this escalating clarity. You start soft to preserve the relationship, but if the message isn't landing, you owe it to everyone to be more direct.
Exactly. And then the third scenario is when saying no is actually the right move from a relationship building standpoint. And this can sound a little counterintuitive because you're saying a clear, respectful no, but that can actually build trust. It shows you have conviction. It shows you're not just trying to make everybody happy.
I've seen this too. A clean no can actually increase trust people because people stop guessing. So they might not like the answer, but they know where you stand. And predictability is underrated in product leadership.
Absolutely. And last of all, don't drag it out. A fast no is better than a slow maybe, especially if that maybe is likely going to turn into a no. Let them know sooner rather than later.
So, how can each PM listening to this say to themselves to know if they're being strategic versus just conflict avoidant?
That's a great question. And I kind of have these questions that I ask myself as a self check. First of all, am I directing this conversation because I'm trying to find a better solution, or am I redirecting it because I just don't want to deal with the discomfort? If it's the first one, you're being strategic. If it's the second one, you're avoiding it.
So, if we are coming to conclusion, we would say that the difference really comes down to intent. Are you trying to reach a better decision or just avoid an uncomfortable moment?
Yep. Intent and outcome. A strategic no leads to a better decision. Conflict avoiding no just delays the inevitable train wreck.
Okay, so we can agree that the real skill here isn't just phrasing, it's judgment, knowing when to protect the leadership relationship, when to protect the roadmap, and when protecting clearly matters more than either.
Exactly. Yeah. And you build that wisdom over time by paying attention to what works and what doesn't. The question isn't really whether you should say no, it's how much relationship capital you want to spend to say it.
If we were to wrap this up, the toddler approach doesn't work because PMs operate in a world of relationships and consequences that toddler don't have to navigate.
Right. And no without saying no isn't manipulation. It's recognizing that in complex organizations, how you say no matters as much as if you say it.
Now, we want to hear from you. What's your go to way of saying no without saying no? Or do you think we're overthinking this and PMs should just be more direct?
Let us know. And if you want us to go deeper in any of these techniques or create scripts that you can use, tell us. We'll happily build whatever the audience needs.
Spotify, Apple, and YouTube links are in the description. Follow us. You don't want to miss the next one.
Remember, good product managers don't avoid saying no.
They just know there's more than one way to say it.
See you at the next one.
See ya. Bye.